New analyses from the House of Commons Library shows UK exports of whiskies to the EU were £105.7 million lower in January to May 2021 compared to the same period in 2019. Figures from the immediate aftermath of Britain leaving the transition period are even worse, dropping 135.9 million from January to March this year compared to 2019. SNP MP for Argyll and Bute, Brendan O'Hara, said, "Scotch whisky plays a crucial role in the success of Scotland's food and drink sector and our economy, given it accounts for 75% of the sector. So for the industry to be losing 5 million per week is devastating. The triple whammy of a Brexit that Scotland didn't vote for, the pandemic and the US tariffs, which have thankfully now been lifted, but not before, they cost the industry at least £500 million, have dealt a hammer blow to the Scottish whisky sector. All in all, the losses to Scotch whisky exports have been eye-watering as a result of a Tory Brexit and the UK government's lack of action over the US tariffs. It is beyond time the UK government made amends for this. In 2019, Scotch whisky accounted for 75% of all Scottish food and drink exports. The same research showed salmon exports to the EU were £1.3 million lower and cheese £5.1 million a week. And it's not nice numbers. The Scotch Whisky Association claimed the latest figures showed that exports were now growing at a faster rate between March and May this year than they did in 2019. A spokesperson for the SWA said, "The way Scotch whisky is exported to the European Union has changed since Brexit, and producers have had to adapt to changes to customs systems, labelling and paperwork, as well as the withdrawal of some transport services." They say the level of exports fluctuates month by month, and this has been impacted over the past 18 months by both the COVID-19 pandemic as well as by the UK's departure from the EU. While it was undoubtedly a tough start to the year for companies, the drop in exports in the first quarter is partly explained by increased exports in December 2020. Now that infection control measures in many of our global markets are easing, the pace of the industry's export recovery is encouraging. Downing Street dismissed the claims as misleading. A UK government spokesperson said, "The impact of the COVID pandemic and restrictions across Europe has affected trade and depressed demand, so it is too early to draw firm conclusions on the impacts of our new trading relationship with the EU." Just saying, the alcohol consumption in the UK rise. Why didn't that happen in the EU? They say the latest export statistics for May also shows that the value of goods exports to the EU was higher than the monthly average for 2020. "We continue to help businesses get the support they need to trade effectively with Europe, including by running export helplines and webinars with experts, providing financial support to SMEs, and delaying the introduction of full import controls. Industries can also seize new opportunities as we strike new trade deals and reduce trade barriers around the world." By the way, it was just one new one. All the others were rollover. But they said, as we did when we secured the suspension of the US's retaliatory tariffs for Scottish whisky earlier this year. And that's just one more small example of the Brexit benefits. Business as a whole is not really happy at the moment. A letter to Boris Johnson sent a fortnight ago by James Ramsbotham called on the Prime Minister to save the North East from the damage being done to our economy, they say, by Brexit, and urged him to give it his most urgent and personal attention. 2 weeks later, it remains unanswered. Ramsbotham is the chief executive of the North East England Chamber of Commerce and speaks for thousands of businesses caught by the red tape and extra costs of complying with EU rules. In a recent survey, 38% of members said sales to Europe had fallen since January. This is not teething problems, he says. Our ports face the EU and our region has the highest proportion of any exporting to the EU. It is vital that more barriers come down. Surveys by the Chamber show that 3/4 of its members wanted to stay in the single market when asked about their personal view. The same proportion reported they had been financially harmed by leaving the EU. Many business people in the Northeast tell me the only way to improve the situation is to go back into the single market. We didn't say that in the letter because the Prime Minister's dogmatic attitude to the subject told us it would fall on deaf ears, he says. Instead, the group called for a relaxation of the rules to allow more HGV truck drivers to work in the UK, a more generous funding of the SME Brexit Support Fund to help more companies train staff and buy equipment needed to complete new customs checks. The letter ended by telling the Prime Minister, damaging the ability of businesses who create wealth for our nation will make this country so much poorer. To do so when we are striving to recover from the pandemic with all of its resulting debt will burden this nation for decades. Ramsbotham, a former Barclays Bank executive and the son of former Army General David Ramsbotham, a crossbench life peer, said he's totally apolitical and when not speaking to local businesses, spends much time in talking to the leaders of local councils, the majority of them Labour. And he says, it seems to me that this government has broken the traditional link between the Conservative Party and business. The real issue is the complete lack of strategic planning. From our perspective, there has been none whatsoever, and Brexit was the same. There was no strategic plan to make Brexit a success, he says. Tariffs may have remained at zero under the trade deal made between the UK and the EU, but Ramsbotham provided a long list of barriers that ministers failed to sort out, including how to apply new rules of origin that determine which goods qualify as tariff-free, difficulties obtaining export health certificates, and additional checks on goods that create queues at ports. The origin thing is a long part in the annexes of the trade deal, by the way. His sense of loss from exiting the EU is supported by analysis from Sussex University's UK Trade Policy Observatory. Last month it said that between January and April this year, the Trade and Cooperation Agreement negotiated to succeed customs union membership reduced UK exports to the EU by 18.7% and imports from the EU by 25.8% compared to the scenario in which the UK did not leave the EU. The Northeast has one of the smallest private sectors relative to the size of the economy after decades of government support that has seen several Whitehall back office departments decamp from London. Earlier this year, the Chancellor Rishi Sunak announced the latest would be a Treasury campus in Darlington, which he said showed the government was serious about levelling up. Ramsbotham, who this autumn will step down as the Chamber's chief executive after 15 years to become chair of Newcastle Building Society, is unimpressed. He says investments are leaching away from the region and holds up the rail manufacturer Hitachi's plans for the region as an example. He says Hitachi bought a site in the northeast with a view to building trains for the whole of Europe. The place was big enough for 3 factories, but they have only built one, and the rest of the land is vacant. If you want to see where the trains are going to be made for the EU, you'll need to visit Hitachi's new factory in Italy. Referring to the cabinet, he says, if Brexit was such a success, you would think they would be shouting it from the rooftops. But they are not. And so you've got even more examples about the wonderful Brexit benefits. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.